Numerous races share similarities with humans, including humans themselves, elves, and dwarves. Then there are the demons. Fewer in number but far more powerful than the human-like races. These two groups have been in conflict for millennia, resulting in the division of the Leander's continent into eastern and western halves. However, when a relatively moderate demon king took power 3 centuries prior, the fighting subsided, and the human races enjoyed a period of uneasy peace. Yet, in the 5th month of the year 2826, this tranquility was shattered. A new demon king ascended, immediately launching a ferocious offensive against the human populations. This assault would later become known as the Great Invasion. Several human nations were conquered, and by the 4th month of the following year, 2827, the Gargan Empire, considered the strongest human military force, had been annihilated. The human races, in response, gathered their remaining troops and initiated a counterattack against the demon. A suicide squad infiltrated the Demon King's fortress, seeking to assassinate him. A human warrior is seen confronting the Demon King. Those present braced themselves, and a grand battle commenced. The scene then shifts to a view of dead monsters strewn about. Next, the suicide squad is depicted moving through the Demon King's castle. A knight checks on his comrade, Theron, inquiring about his condition and noticing drops of blood falling from him. Theron glares fiercely at a smirking demon warrior who stands ready to fight him. With a human captive behind her, Theron orders his two companions to proceed, promising to deal with the demoness. His friends comply and depart. Slowly, Theron advances on the demoness, sword drawn. The scene transitions to his two companions standing before a massive gate. The knight produces a small vial and drinks its contents, causing his eyes to glow red. The knight and his female friend then enter the gate, discovering a red gem before them. The knight approaches it. His friend cautions him about red orbs targeting him. The knight attempts to deflect them with his sword, but one strikes his leg. Another orb is about to strike the finishing blow when his friend tries to destroy it with her magical staff. However, the orb detonates, eliminating her instantly before his eyes. At that moment, a winged creature materializes before him, releasing a volley of red orbs. The knight braces himself, sword in hand, to confront this creature. The knight rushes towards the creature, evading the red orbs and striking it with his sword. But the creature transforms its hands into blades, and they trade blows until the creature unleashes another barrage of red orbs. The knight attempts to avoid them, but is struck repeatedly. The knight demands to know what this attack is. The creature explains that it's a potent elimination spell, designed to obliterate everything. The knight resolves to use the gem's magical energy to counter the creature and its spell. Focusing the gem's power into his sword, the knight attacks the creature. The creature attempts to block the knight's attack, but the knight finally manages to pierce its form with his blade. The creature's body dissipates before the knight, and the knight collapses to the ground, dropping his sword and declaring, "It's finally over." Silence fills the area, and the knight realizes he is the only one left alive. He closes his eyes and thinks about the family and friends he has lost. He falls to the floor, but is disturbed by a sound coming from the glowing red gem ahead of him. Despite his injuries, the knight struggles to rise and approach the gem. Worried about its magic going out of control, the injured knight reaches it and reaches out to grab it. He finally seizes it, and a magic circle forms around him. The knight starts to feel pain. The scene cuts to a butterfly resting on a flower. Suddenly, the butterfly vanishes, and the scene changes to the knight waking up in a bed. He scans the room, wondering if it's his. He gets up and moves to the window, gazing at the city's buildings and appreciating its beauty. But a vision of the city engulfed in flames flashes through his mind, bringing tears to his eyes and making him think he is dreaming. Just then, a girl enters to wake him up, calling, "Wake up, Kyle," but she notices he's already awake. Kyle stares at her and says, "Lizzie." Lizzie approaches him, asking if he has a stomachache. Kyle looks at her and embraces her tightly, convinced he is dreaming, but Lizzie blushes and tries to pull away from his embrace. But he holds on tight, so she tries to push him away, and they both tumble onto the bed. Lizzie becomes angry and headbutts him in the stomach. Kyle crumples onto the bed in pain. Lizzie yells at him, saying she is not emotionally prepared for this. She storms out of the room, upset. Meanwhile, Kyle, still in pain, mutters to himself, "I feel pain. So this isn't a dream." He pulls back the covers of the bed and discovers the red gem. He picks it up, confirming that this is reality. Kyle examines himself and realizes he looks younger and is free of injuries. He wonders what's happening to him. Kyle walks to the window overlooking the city and sees that it has been restored to its former glory. Also, Lizzie is alive again, and he has reverted to a younger version of himself. He concludes that he has traveled back in time. He removes the red gem from his pocket and studies it, believing it's the source of his transformation. A feeling of hunger washes over him. He enters the dining room and is greeted by a table laden with food. assuming that Lizzie must have prepared it, as she often did for him and his mother, neither of whom were skilled cooks. Kyle smiles. Kyle sits down and begins to eat, tears well up in his eyes, because it has been a long time since he tasted food like this, and he continues to eat. Later, Kyle has devoured everything on the table. Just then, someone approaches him from behind, expressing surprise that Kyle ate all the food himself. He begins searching the pots for leftovers. Kyle looks at him and exclaims, "Darren?" The events of their recent battle flash through his mind. Darren looks at him and asks, "What are you staring at?" Kyle regains his composure and asks Darren the date. Kyle is shocked when Darren tells him that it's the 24th of the 5th month in the year 2823. Kyle shouts, "Are you sure about that?" Darren replies, "Yes." He adds that it's his birthday and that Kyle should consider the meal as his birthday gift. Kyle tells him it's a cheap gift. Darren departs, complaining of being hungry. Darren suggests that if he begs Lizzie, she might prepare a delicious meal for him. Darren exits. Kyle mutters to himself that Darren will do anything to get his way. Kyle reflects on what to do, pondering whether he has truly traveled back in time due to magical power. The scene changes to Kyle going to the building next door to his house, which houses his office. Kyle sees a girl reading a book, recognizing her as someone who had perished. The girl looks up at Kyle and greets him, saying, "It's not often you come here." It becomes clear to us that this girl is his mother, who was absorbed in books all night and did not even notice the passing of time. Kyle asks his mother about magic. His mother seems unsure if she can answer his question. Kyle reminds her that she's one of the city's most renowned mages. His mother smiles at him. Kyle asks her, "Is it possible to cast a spell to travel back in time?" His mother confirms that spells affecting time exist, but their destinations are unknown, and no one can use them because they demand immense magical power. She also explains that even the greatest mage in history using all her magical energy could not travel through time, not even for a moment. Kyle presses further, asking, even if a magical artifact were used, his mother is surprised and suggests that using an artifact is an interesting idea. A magic artifact could act as a conduit to store magical energy, but to store that much energy, she explains, would take 1,000 years. Kyle then asks if forbidden rituals could be used. His mother explains, sacrifice rituals to convert life energy into magical energy. She looks at him and asks where he learned about this. Kyle gets flustered and claims he read about it in a book. His mother replies that such rituals are impossible. Even if forbidden ones were used, she says he'd need the souls of half the people on the continent. Kyle then remembers the war and thinks to himself that sacrificing half the continent might be possible. His mother continues, telling him that no artifact can hold the magical energy needed for time travel. She picks up a book, opens it, and exclaims, "I found it." She shows him a picture from the book and says, "The legendary holy dragon's heart is the only thing that could work." Kyle sees that the heart in the picture is the same red gem he has. We then learn that the ancient magic kingdom of Ixarles thrived for 1,000 years thanks to the holy dragon's heart, but its energy was depleted, which led to the kingdom's downfall. Kyle's mother explains that the holy dragon's heart can store magical energy for time travel, but it has been missing for 1,000 years, and she suspects that the demons may have found it. And now Kyle understands. His mother is happy because they have not spoken like this for a long time, as Kyle used to avoid her. Kyle apologizes to her. His mother says that he seems more mature, as if he's returned from the future. Kyle is surprised by her words, but his mother tells him that she is joking. She tells Kyle that she is hungry, and says Lizzie must have prepared food for them. Kyle tells her that he already ate all the food. His mother is taken aback, and Kyle explains that he couldn't control himself. His mother asks if today is his birthday. Kyle says that as usual, she forgot. She smiles and replies that he should consider the meal as his birthday gift. Kyle despairs and wonders why everyone is so stingy with his gift. Kyle sits alone outside, contemplating the holy dragon's heart. He says, back to the past, and wonders what the heart intended. Kyle is startled by Lizzie standing behind him. Kyle apologizes for his behavior that morning. Lizzie says, "At least you feel bad." Kyle says that he had a strange and disturbing dream and apologizes again. Lizzie asks what the dream was about. Kyle is silent. She asks, "Did you see me die?" Kyle looks at her and says, "Something like that." Lizzie understands why Kyle was upset and sits down next to him, telling him that she forgives him. She also remembers it's his birthday and wishes him a happy birthday. Kyle remembers that his town is near the demon territories and was the first to be attacked in the Great Invasion. He remembers it burning until it resembled hell, and also losing Lizzie and swearing to avenge her. Lizzie calls his name, and Kyle snaps out of his thoughts. Lizzie asks what is wrong and says that he is hiding something. Kyle replies and reassures her. Lizzie sits next to him. Kyle tells himself that in 3 years, the peace will end, and he's the only one who knows. And if he does nothing, he will see his town burn again and lose those he loves. He yells out that he will change his destiny, and stands up, repeating that he will change his destiny, the destiny of the world, vowing to do whatever it takes. Lizzie stares at him in astonishment. Finally, Kyle is seen writing down the events he remembers will occur in the future in a notebook. He wonders what he should do. The demons will attack in 3 years, and no one will believe him if he warns them. He thinks about killing the Demon King, but realizes that he is too weak to do it alone. He stands and grabs his sword. Kyle was practicing sword play, images flashing in his mind of the demonic entity that had overwhelmed him in the time to come. Blasts of crimson energy hurtled toward Kyle, and he deflected some of them with his blade, but a substantial burst of red struck him directly. He realized he only had about 3 years before the great invasion commenced. A realization made more urgent by his lack of prior dedicated swordsmanship or magical training. As he cast a few spells, he noticed a definite increase in his magical reserves. Attempting an attack on the creature, another magical blast connected, throwing him backwards. It was clear he had considerable magical power, but his physical form couldn't endure its full force. A reckless charge would be suicidal. It would all be for nothing if he perished while trying to grow stronger and live a healthy, fulfilling life. Meanwhile, Theron and Lizzie observed him, puzzled by his actions. Lizzie commented on how strangely he was behaving. Theron recalled how Kyle used to concede defeat after barely 15 rounds, then spend 3 days staring into space. Naturally, Theron would win. Just then, a woman approached from behind, inquiring about their plans, and Lizzie greeted her warmly. It turned out to be Layla Sand, Theron's mother. She questioned Lizzie on whether her son, Theron, was properly cared for. Lizzie playfully revealed that he frequently came to her begging for food, much to Theron's annoyance. Layla Sand then turned her attention to Kyle, wondering what kind of monster he was battling, remarking that he seemed like someone else entirely. Lizzie added that he'd had a blank, lifeless expression just yesterday. Theron chimed in, mentioning Kyle's past aspirations of inheriting his family's estate. Layla Sand speculated that a sudden change in a young man like Kyle was often due to a woman. Lizzie looked shocked by the suggestion, but Layla Sand, noticing her expression, quickly added that she might be mistaken. A burning sensation flared in Kyle's back, which he attributed to his heightened magical energy. Lizzie walked over to him, demanding to know who the woman was. Kyle looked confused by the question. Lizzie seized him, trying to force a confession, and he remained baffled by her conduct. She shook him roughly, causing him to vomit. Afterwards, Lizzie brought Kyle some food and apologized for her earlier behavior, although he was clearly still displeased. Theron, seated beside Kyle, enjoyed the meal. Kyle glanced at Layla Sand and conveyed his joy at her return, and sentiment echoed by his mother. Kyle then requested to ask everyone a question. Layla Sand seemed surprised by his formality. Kyle inquired about who possessed sufficient influence to control and sway several countries. Theron looked astonished by the question. Layla Sand contemplated the query, before his mother answered that the High Priest of Mother Earth commanded considerable influence. Layla Sand mentioned Randolph the hero, who defeated the Demon King some 3 centuries prior. Theron added that elves, dwarves, and humans would all heed his words. Kyle realized that kings, heroes, and priests were the figures people followed, and therefore, he needed to become a hero himself within the next 2 years. He stood up abruptly. Layla Sand observed him with a knowing look, convinced that something had transpired. Lizzie, however, saw nothing amiss. Kyle was now contemplating the future and the need to keep a close watch on him. Theron concurred. Kyle mused on the persisting burning sensation in his back. Later that evening, Kyle was in bed, surrounded by books, understanding that having knowledge of the future gave him an advantage. Theron entered, surprised by the sight. Kyle stated that he was not especially grateful to his mother's interest in books. Theron sat down next to him, asking if he was serious about becoming a hero. Kyle affirmed that he was. Theron cautioned that it was no easy feat. Kyle understood this and asked Theron if he had any ideas to help. Theron brought up defeating the Demon King. Kyle replied that if he could accomplish that, he wouldn't be in this situation. Theron conceded the point. Kyle then asked what a hero required. Theron suggested strength. Kyle countered that mere strength was insufficient, and he believed money was essential. Theron commented that this was uncharacteristically blunt. Kyle explained that while heroes didn't accept payment for their deeds, travel and adventure demanded funds. Theron realized such endeavors needed financing. Kyle continued, noting that a hero also needed connections with reputable and influential figures, as that enhanced their reputation. Theron became worried. Kyle added that with wealth and influence, much could be achieved, but it still wasn't enough. Theron inquired what else he needed. Kyle said that a hero also required luck, the kind that puts them in the right place at the right time to intervene in disasters and become a hero. Theron looked at him intently and asked if he meant. Kyle interrupted, asserting he wasn't suggesting creating disasters just to solve them, but he was prepared to exploit every opportunity, even if it meant employing deception. Theron stated that such talk was unbecoming of a future hero and questioned Kyle's true motives. Kyle responded by asking if he was curious. Theron explained that he felt Kyle's ambition lay beyond simply becoming a hero, that he wished to achieve something else. Kyle smiled and replied that he had his reasons and Theron had to trust him. Theron stood and wished him well, then exited the room. Kyle affirmed that Theron would assist him, opened his notebook, commenting that he would use it for funding, and he hoped to meet her once more. As for popularity, he thought that if he could do something regarding the Arkan incident, and he adds that time will be tight then. The following morning, Layla Sand informed Kyle that she was embarking on a journey and asked if he'd told Saraya. Kyle confirmed he had, noting that she cried profusely. Layla Sand dismissed it as overreacting and being overly protective, and that it was good to discover the world, and asked him to bring Theron along. Theron looked taken aback. Kyle mentioned that he was planning to and was glad to have her permission. Layla Sand stressed that Theron was a strong guardian, and Kyle promised not to squander his abilities. Theron felt slighted, feeling he had no choice in the matter. Later, Lizzie asked Kyle if he was going on a journey. Kyle confirmed it, mentioning it was in 2 days. She asked about his destination. Kyle replied he was heading to the royal capital, Mad, to acquire necessities before commencing the real work. Lizzie looked at him, requesting that he just listen, but Kyle interjected, stating unequivocally that she couldn't accompany him. Lizzie became indignant, suggesting that she was training with the prophecy warriors and wouldn't be a burden. Kyle looked at her and explained that her mother didn't want her to be in danger. She retorted that she would apologize at her grave. Kyle insisted that he wanted her to remain in a safe place. He assured her she would be the first person he visited upon his return, and requested she wait for him. Lizzie looked at him and said she had nothing to say to him. Kyle smiled at her, saying, "Consider it the courage bond that comes with age." She asked what he was talking about, as they were both 16, and here Lizzie asked Kyle to promise her that he would return safely, and Kyle promised her that. Afterward, Kyle apologized to Lizzie for requesting her company at the market, but Lizzie said it was fine. Abruptly, Lizzie noticed an elven being and commented on its beauty. Kyle looked surprised and left Lizzie to approach the elf creature. Then, Kyle recognized her from the future, when they were sitting together, and she asked him to call her by her real name, which is, Kyle said Exis. The creature appeared shocked and angered, demanding to know what he'd said. Kyle was taken aback, as this was supposed to be their initial encounter, and that it was a secret name that shouldn't be revealed. He asked Exis who she was. She drew her swords, but Kyle caught up and asked her to wait. Exis told him to let go of her hands. Kyle realized this would cause a commotion, but he had no other option. Suddenly we hear Kyle command Exis to sleep, and she actually fell asleep. Kyle stated that Exis had previously mentioned visiting Ramazi, but he hadn't anticipated meeting her. Suddenly, he noticed Lizzie standing behind him, visibly angry, who told Kyle that she knows the creature is beautiful, but didn't expect him to approach her so quickly. Kyle looked at her anxiously and promised to explain, saying he was feeling lonely without her, but Lizzie interjected, saying, "What are you saying? I'm here." She became agitated and insisted that she would definitely accompany him on his trip. Back home, everyone was at the table, and Kyle said he was glad to have met her. He inquired if her name was Orson. Exis rose to her feet angrily, telling him that only she and her father knew that name. She demanded to know how he knew it. Kyle hesitated, knowing he couldn't reveal the reason right now since the event occurs in 4 years and they will fall in love and she will tell him the name herself. Exis explained that she must eliminate him to prevent the secret of the name from being divulged. Lizzie looked at her and said, "Hold on." Kyle assured her that he would eventually tell her. Exis grew furious and asked if he comprehended the significance of an elf's true name. Kyle affirmed that he did and wouldn't allow her to kill him. He suggested that until he could reveal the truth, why not invoke the contract to prevent him from misusing her name? Exis was astonished that Kyle was aware of activating contracts. Kyle explained that contracts were typically forged with souls, but in the names of kings, and those who commanded the elements could offer their real names to bind humans. He continued that the contract stipulated that nobody could know her name or use it for evil purposes. He asked her what she thought. Exis asked him if he knew what would happen if he broke the contract. Kyle replied, "Yes, I will die." Lizzie looked shocked at this. Exis paused and said his life was also at stake. She continued, "Let's do it if you're serious." However, Exis couldn't activate the contract immediately, as the moon wasn't full, and the next full moon was weeks away. Therefore, they would have to wait. Kyle apologized. As he was departing the next day, Exis was taken aback. Following that, Kyle's mother began to weep as Kyle prepared to leave, and Lizzie comforted her, assuring her not to worry because she would be with him. Kyle asked if she was really coming along. Lizzie replied, "Of course. It's decided." Kyle's father wished him well and advised him to look after his friends. Kyle stood there silent, so Lizzie reminded him that his dad is talking to him. Kyle realized this and asked his parents to take care of themselves, and his mother cried. Then Kyle departed with Theron and Exis, and Lizzie trailed after them. As they walked, Theron remarked that he was pleased to have a beautiful creature like Exis on the journey, and Exis clarified she is not with them and is only there to watch Kyle. Lizzie asked Kyle, "Isn't the capital in the opposite direction?" Kyle smiled and said, "Let's leave that for later." He continued, "Since Orza, who commands the elements, is accompanying us." She replied that she is not one of their group, and Theron and Lizzie applauded. Kyle added that they would first visit the Sard Mountains and asked them about the Sard legend. Lizzie replied, "Isn't that the legend about the magical kingdom of Azeris? Theron also says it's about the maze of the magical princess. That place is just a legend." Kyle approached them and clarified that he actually possessed a map of the place, detailing the treasure chamber. Lizzie looked at him hopelessly, and Theron stated that Kyle has been tricked by a fake map, but Kyle insists it's real. Theron explained that individuals driven by money inevitably meet with misfortune. Kyle understood they couldn't believe him now, but Exis suddenly commented that the map was made from a magical tree over a millennium old, a technique that was lost long ago and could no longer be replicated. She leaned towards the view that the map was authentic. Theron suddenly trusted what Exis said because beautiful women's words are trustworthy. Lizzie examined the map and said it's a vast place and wondered how long it would take to reach the treasure. Kyle assured her that he had a plan, and Lizzie and Theron asked about the plan. Kyle said, "We will dig," and we see Kyle and Theron digging. And Theron asked why they were digging a tunnel. Kyle explained that they were creating a shortcut to the treasure, as the maze was extensive and filled with traps. Theron was shocked by Kyle's words. Kyle continued that there were also gases and magical weapons. Theron angrily asked Kyle if all of this was mentioned on the map. Kyle hesitated as he knew all that due to the troubles he faced before, but told Theron that the maze is legendary and they must be careful. Kyle added that when he said he wanted to become a hero, he hadn't expected his first assignment to be digging a tunnel. We hear Exis say, "Why are we using a dwarf spear to do this?" Kyle explained that this saved them from having to purchase magical equipment. Exis asked Theron to stop digging because she hadn't finished fortifying the walls. Theron asked her what that is, and she tells Kyle to use detect magic to check the direction of the treasure room. Theron asked Kyle why Orza seemed more engaged now. Kyle told him she's a serious girl. Orza ordered them to stop talking. At night, the friends ate and Kyle said it's very delicious, and also Orza feels the food is refreshing after the effort she put into soul magic. Lizzie asked them to eat, and Orza asked if she caught this bear. Lizzie replied, "Yes." Orza asked if she caught it with a trap. Lizzie answered she caught it with her hands. Orza was surprised. After some time, we see Kyle looking at the map and saying, "We almost arrived." Orza came to him and asked about Theron, who hadn't returned yet. Kyle explained that Theron said he would take a break. Then Orza asked him why he wanted to be a hero. Looking at her rings, she asks if they are part of your training. Kyle replied that each ring increased his body weight by a factor of 2 or 3. He keeps digging and says that right now, he is improving his physical fitness. She asked him why he endures all this hardship and if it had anything to do with knowing her real name. Kyle didn't answer, but at that moment, he shouted, "We've arrived," and asked her to call Lizzie and Theron. We see Kyle strike the wall, and it collapses and we see the treasure in front of them, which looks at them in amazement, and Theron rushes to the gold crazily. Kyle urged them to remain focused, reminding them that they only required the funds to achieve his objective. Orza agreed with him, and so did Lizzie. He asked them to look at Theron, who had lost his mind over the money. Just then, Kyle declares it was his opportunity and left them, heading towards the room with the sword. Suddenly, a girl manifested before him, voicing her admiration for the fact that humans had arrived there. The young woman related to Kyle that he had overcome a great many trials to be standing before her. As she spoke, Kyle interjected, warning her that his companions might overhear. The girl flared up, exclaiming, "How dare you? Do you even realize?" Kyle cut her off, requesting that she settle down. He clarified that he knew her identity. She was a facsimile of Seldonia, the magic queen who once governed the ancient realm of magic. The girl was taken aback and inquired how he knew this. Kyle responded that he would elaborate later. He continued, stating that he had circumvented her traps and enigmas to arrive at this point, and even constructed a detour. Seldonia snapped back. "How dare you do that to my resting place?" Kyle shifted his stance and urged her to initiate the final trial, asserting that he was claiming the blade. Seldonia, surprised once more, questioned, "Just who are you?" Kyle simply answered, "You'll find out soon," and grinned. The girl then dissolved into an emerald glow. Entering the sword, Kyle drew the sword. He recalled his friends and the events that had transpired leading up to this moment. Seldonia manifested before him again, asking, "Is this the truth?" Kyle realized she had gleaned his thoughts. He explained that he possessed a sacred dragon heart. Seldonia was astounded, knowing that magic transcended time. Just then, his friends arrived, searching for him. Kyle was irritated because they were oblivious to the situation. He implored Seldonia to cooperate with his charade. She asked him how she should do that. Lizzie questioned what he was doing there. Feigning surprise, Kyle announced that he had stumbled upon a legendary weapon. His friends exclaimed in unison, "What?" The scene shifted to Seldonia consuming Lizzie's food. She commented that the meals were exceedingly palatable. Lizzie reminded her that she had prepared them for their expedition and then asked directly, "Are you really the Queen of Magic?" Seldonia clarified that she was a fragment of her and a sentient magical being, created to evaluate their worthiness for her treasure. Lizzie then asked how she could consume the food. She responded by explaining she converted them to magical energy to sustain herself. Lizzie asked why she took the form of a child. Seldonia explained that she had halted her physical development at the age when her magical prowess reached its zenith. She added that if they were deemed unworthy of her treasure, she would have triggered the final security measure, obliterating the labyrinth. However, she expressed satisfaction with Kyle and deemed him capable of wielding the sword. Kyle expressed his gratitude. Seldonia requested that he take the summoning satchel, since it was linked to the treasure vault and ideal for retrieving the treasure. Theron interrupted, inquiring if he, too, could wield a blade, perhaps even instead of Kyle. Seldonia was taken aback and declined his request. Orza remarked that some tastes remained unchanged after a millennium. Afterwards, on the street, Seldonia was seen gleefully enjoying food alongside them. Kyle suggested she could eat later. Seldonia caught a whiff of a delectable aroma wafting from a nearby vendor and gravitated towards it. But Theron seized her, remarking that she resembled village children experiencing the capital for the first time. Just then, Lizzie inquired about their destination. Kyle replied that they had secured the treasure and it was now time to prepare for upcoming conflicts, meaning they needed superior equipment. They headed towards a merchant's shop. The shopkeeper greeted them, asking what they desired. Kyle responded that he would like to procure some gear. The shopkeeper apologized, inquiring if they had a referral. Kyle recalled that new clientele were required to pay a deposit before entering the premises. The shopkeeper apologized once more and asked for a deposit of 10,000 gadol. Kyle asked if for gold exoral pieces would suffice. The shopkeeper was pleasantly surprised and thanked them for doing business. He then ushered them inside to showcase the merchandise. A man named Vespus, the shop's proprietor, came into view. Seldonia asked him, "Are these garments the work of Milanus?" Vespus was astonished and asked how she knew, given his renowned skill in the ancient magic kingdom. Seldonia retorted that he wasn't that remarkable, as he would often weep whenever she pointed out imperfections in his craft. Vespus remained surprised. Meanwhile, Kyle stepped forward and covered Seldonia's mouth, apologizing to Vespus for the comments of a small child. Vespus accepted the apology. Subsequently, Seldonia was seen seated, consuming another snack. Vespus could be heard remarking that Kyle was examining dragonhide armor, renowned for both physical and magical protection, and its resistance to heat, cold, and poison. Kyle stated he would like to purchase it. Vespus was delighted. Theron stepped forward, expressing his refusal to wear the same armor. Kyle glanced at Lizzie and Orza, encouraging them to acquire whatever they required from the shop. Lizzie concurred, while Orza pondered what she should purchase. Kyle donned the armor and noted that his movements felt less restricted than he anticipated. Lizzie admired a pair of gloves, and Orza donned a soulstone amulet, her first experience wearing such an item. Theron asked a shop assistant if they had any impressive swords. The assistant went to retrieve one, and Seldonia continued to eat. In the meantime, Kyle requested that the proprietor display the magic stones. Vespus sought Kyle's opinion on an attack stone imbued with explosion magic. Kyle then inquired about a stone offering defense against creeping creatures. Vespus presented another stone. Kyle recognized it, saying that it was a blizzard stone. Vespus confirmed his assertion, adding that imbuing stones with cold spells was a costly endeavor. Kyle responded that he would acquire them all. Vespus was astonished and asked Kyle if he would truly purchase the entire collection of stones. Kyle added that if healing potions were also available, he would take those as well. Vespus exclaimed, "You'll take everything?" Kyle clarified that he would compensate with jewels, which he estimated to be worth 10 million gadol. Vespus was utterly stunned, struggling to believe what he was hearing. Next, Vespus and his staff were observed waving goodbye to Kyle and his companions as they departed. Therein remarked that it had been an extravagant shopping spree and voiced his hope that no scandalous rumors would circulate. Kyle turned to reassure him that they would depart by the following day. Therein was taken aback, asserting there was no time to squander. Lizzie chimed in, stating that she would like to explore the capital since she rarely had the opportunity. Orza offered to accompany her, having visited the city previously. Lizzie expressed her gratitude and they bid farewell to Kyle. Kyle felt pleased that they were forging closer bonds. Abruptly, Seldonia manifested, also requesting permission to leave, hinting that there might be a restaurant serving delectable cuisine. Kyle halted her, explaining that he wished to discuss something with her, and Seldonia acquiesced. Kyle broached the topic of whether the future could genuinely be altered. Seldonia remarked that it was an odd query, adding that the future was not predetermined in the first place. Kyle pressed her to elaborate. Seldonia explained that her journey back in time had also transported her to another dimension simultaneously, which was her theory. She said that there was not a single timeline, but time was divided into several timelines like tree branches, and Kyle's soul jumped from one branch to another. The proof of this was the Holy Dragon Heart, which he used as a catalyst. It also transported with him. Kyle inferred that if this were a distinct world, it might not be constrained by the same historical trajectory. Seldonia conceded that it wouldn't be identical, but significant details would likely remain constant, and she affirmed that the grand invasion would still occur. Kyle absorbed her words, and Seldonia surmised that they could shape history with their actions, albeit with considerable difficulty. Kyle responded that this was enough information for him, before asking if there were two holy dragon hearts in this world, right? But there is only one copy of it. Seldonia then proposed another hypothesis, suggesting that the apex of Forbidden's magic involved a fusion spell. Kyle was taken by surprise and asked about it, not having encountered it previously. Seldonia explained that this was a spell to increase magical power by fusing souls. Kyle repeated her words in surprise. Seldonia continued that your magical power is determined at birth according to your spiritual composition, and she added that in ancient Ixerals, they researched strengthening souls, and that it can be done by fusing them, but there are several problems. Kyle inquired if the endeavor had failed. Seldonia confirmed that it had and continued, that they tried using infant souls and tested artificial souls, and they feared nothing. But she went off topic and she explains to Kyle that there are two holy dragon hearts now, and she asks him what he thinks happened to Kyle's soul in this world. Kyle asked her in confusion, "What happened? Is it possible?" Seldonia replied, "That's right. It's there," and Kyle looks at his hands. Seldonia elaborated that the soul fusion had occurred without his awareness, presumably augmenting his spiritual strength and doubling his magical potential, and she asks him, "Do you remember that?" Kyle remembers his training earlier. Seldonia elucidated that he could potentially wield potent magical spells in the future. Kyle was astonished, though Seldonia cautioned that it was merely her conjecture and that his capacity to master it was another matter. Kyle inquired about potential adverse effects. Seldonia admitted her uncertainty, given the unprecedented nature of the event, and urged him to report any unusual sensations promptly, and Kyle thanked her. As night fell, Lizzie mentioned that while she was accustomed to outdoor camping, the available bedding was particularly luxurious. Orza concurred. Lizzie asked when she should go to sleep. Orza replied that she looked forward each month to the moment when the light of the full moon envelops her body. Lizzie said that she has to sleep. Orza mused that the journey was proving to be rather pleasant, noting Lizzie's amiable demeanor, Seldonia's vast knowledge, Theron's amusing antics, and Kyle's perceptive gaze, which, while unsettling, didn't particularly bother her. Suddenly, Lizzie cried out in her sleep, proclaiming that she was the only one authorized to be close to Kyle. Orza deduced that she was talking in her sleep and looked at the moon, but suddenly she screams that she forgot something. Subsequently, Kyle was seen lying prostrate on the forest floor. He observed that his endurance had improved, but he still had a long way to go. Seldonia materialized, discussing a ghost training style that had not existed in her time. Kyle looked at her and insisted that it doesn't compare to real fighting. He glanced at his sword, perceiving it as an extension of himself. Seldonia corroborated his sentiment, adding that the sword embodied the magical techniques of the Ixerals, surpassing any weapon forged by human hands. Kyle told her that he has used mithril swords before, but they don't compare to this one. Seldonia clarified that the sword was not composed of mithril. Kyle was astonished. Without warning, Orza approached them. Kyle was surprised to see her and asked what brings her here. Orza reminded him about the contract deadline. Kyle had also forgotten about that. Orza told him it was his suggestion. Kyle realized this, but asked her if they can do it later. Orza grew agitated, Noting that the next deadline was a month away, putting her true name at risk, Kyle felt obligated to comply, given her insistence. We see Orza say that usually, they exchange real names and promise to stay together for life, performed in a marriage ceremony. Her heart trembled when she first heard it. She never imagined doing this with someone she's known for only half a month. She called Kale and tells him to stand here, but Kale is asleep. Orza called him, Kale awoke, apologized, and stood before her. She explained she enacted the contract. We see Urza performing magic. Kale thinks that from now on, it will be as before. Orza enacted the contract, commanding Kale not to reveal her true name to anyone or misuse it for malicious purposes. She told him to swear on it. Kale swore. Instantly, a radiant light ascended into the heavens. Kale advanced, but Orza pushed him away. Kale apologized, but suddenly, we see Orza explain that since she's in the magic circle, she's making a contract with the spirit of the fire salamander. Kale was shocked. Orza looked at him and said her first command is to burn the person in front of him. We hear Kale scream in an explosion. In the morning, Kale, Orza, and Theron appeared fatigued. Lizzie inquired about their well-being. Kale explained that a minor incident had transpired during the night. Orza ordered him to be quiet and not talk about it. Lizzie asked Kale about the scent of fire emanating from him. Kale responded that there had been a misunderstanding during the night. He glanced at Orza and clarified that the contract had been executed. He asked her why she continues her journey with them. Orza replied she wants to know how and why he knows her true name, and she won't let Kale out of her sight. Lizzie interrupted, saying he was flirting with women for sure. Theron was annoyed. Lizzie told them to ignore him. She asked them why they are heading to Arkan. Kale hesitantly replied that Seldonia had a premonition. Seldonia was surprised. Kale continued that according to his readings, Arkan should be their next destination. Seldonia agreed. They arrived in Arkan. Lizzie was surprised by the crowd. Theron explained that Princess Melina was arriving to offer condolences, and he had long awaited the chance to see her. Lizzie said they are lucky. This was also Orza's maiden voyage seeing the princess. Subsequently, the princess emerged before the assembly. Orza remarked that the princess was the future queen. They confirmed that she was indeed beautiful. They see the children surrounding her. A child suddenly fell and we see the princess go to comfort her. We see people in the crowd applauding and commoners explain that the princess dedicated time for this visit. At that moment, Kale recognized the princess's guard, Xanthus, who glanced in Kale's direction before departing. Seldonia asked Kale if he's sure this is the princess. Kale confirmed that she was 16 years of age and fated to perish in today's time. Later, Kale sat with Seldonia and divulged that the princess was destined to die within 2 days. During her journey from Arkan to Sana's village, when Hydra would assault the caravan, he elaborated that the forest bordering Arkan was teeming with monsters and that Sana's village had been targeted by Hydra a month prior. The princess was visiting in response to the attack. She would proceed to Sana's village, despite the lingering dangers, and meet her demise there. The event would be deemed a tragic misfortune, but Kale suspected it was attributable to her imprudence. Seldonia asked him if there wasn't anything suspicious about her death, like a planned assassination disguised as a monster attack. Kale clarified that these were varying accounts surrounding the princess's demise. He added that her half-brother, Prince Karen, was considered the prime suspect, given his secondary position in the line of succession as the offspring of a mistress, making him the principal beneficiary of her death. He explained what makes him suspicious is that the prince is currently in the city. Seldonia tells him no one talks about that. Kale told her the prince is introverted and doesn't appear in public. He added that all these were rumors about her death and were ultimately considered an unfortunate accident. Seldonia understood that Kale aimed to leverage the incident. Kale confirmed his intentions, citing that by rescuing the princess, he would be transformed into a celebrated hero. Getting to his feet, Kyle went on, explaining the key was for his effort to rescue the princess to appear in plan. He did point out, though, that he lacked definite knowledge of where the Hydra would strike and needed to observe her. Just then, Theron walked in, saying he had inquired about the princess's arrangements but learned nothing. Kyle questioned why he was asking about her plans. Theron responded it was so he could have their destined meeting with the princess. Kyle, surprised, asked, "What?" Theron continued, stating he would valiantly step in to shield her from whatever peril she encountered. Kyle was taken aback, and Theron asked what was wrong. Kyle informed him that a similar thought had occurred to him. Theron was taken by surprise and became irritated, but Kyle clarified that the princess was genuinely in harm's way, based on Seldonia's glimpse into the future. Seldonia affirmed this. Theron believed this was his opportunity and that he had to follow the princess. Kyle cautioned him against acting rashly. Afterward, the princess's procession could be seen departing the palace, with Kyle and his companions observing it. Lizzie inquired if the princess was truly at risk. Theron clarified that it was just a premonition, but Seldonia corrected him. saying it was her vision of the future. Urza asked how they would tail the procession, noting they couldn't get too close. Seldonia explained she would assist them with her unique abilities. Abruptly, she changed into a falcon. Everyone stared in amazement, but Seldonia clarified that her real form was the gemstone embedded in the sword Kyle was wielding. She then ascended into the air and monitored the princess's procession from a distance, remaining unnoticed. What Seldonia observed, Kyle and his friends could see through the sword. They saw that the city guards were protecting the princess. Kyle commented that the city guards were well-trained, but unreliable. Just then, Urza remarked that this was incredible and, if used correctly, could be even more potent than a good weapon. Theron exclaimed, his jealousy flaring up, because Kyle could peek whenever he wished. Lizzie and Urza looked at him, surprised by his statement. At that moment, they overheard Seldonia announcing that something odd was unfolding. Kyle swiftly inquired, is it the monsters? Seldonia specified that the princess's carriage drivers were assaulting the guards. Theron exclaimed that this was insane. Kyle took off running and ordered them to head there. They found that the carriage drivers had eliminated the guards. One of them was dispersing some sort of magical powder. Kyle and his companions drew near. Kyle spoke a magical incantation, rushed at the carriage drivers, and subdued them. Then, he secured them with ropes. Theron went to check on the princess and reported that she was unconscious. Kyle remarked that they surely had accomplices who could arrive any moment and requested that Theron stay with the princess. Suddenly, a dog materialized and attacked Kyle, but Kyle dispatched it with a sword. Another group of hellhounds could be seen standing before them, beginning their attack. Urza and Lizzie commenced taking them down. A dog moved and devoured one of the carriage drivers. Kyle questioned if Theron could drive the carriage. Theron approached the carriage, but told Kyle that he couldn't because the carriage's reins were severed. Suddenly, they heard the heavy footsteps of a large monster approaching. Kyle had anticipated its arrival. Seldonia informed Kyle that it was nearby. Kyle told Theron that the princess's well-being was paramount and asked him to remain with her. He asked Lizzie and Urza to go to Theron. Urza asked him, are you going to fight it alone? Kyle reassured her that he wouldn't be reckless and that he had a chance to defeat it. Urza regarded him intently and asked him not to die. Kyle ran toward the monster. Urza and Lizzie battled the hellhounds. Urza summoned a salamander, which appeared and set the hellhounds ablaze. Elsewhere, Kyle was running, searching for the monster. They overheard Seldonia asking him if he could vanquish a hydra. Kyle responded that its power was determined by the number of heads it possessed and that he had previously defeated a three-headed hydra. All of a sudden, a hydra appeared ahead. Kyle was shocked because the hydra had numerous heads, not just three. The monster roared. Seldonia asked Kyle, should we flee? But Kyle said it was too late and that he had to fight it. The hydra moved to attack Kyle. Kyle commented that the hydra's movements were predictable, but its scales were resistant to sword attacks. He added that its poisonous breath was even more dangerous. It then released its poisonous breath at Kyle. The area filled with the toxic smoke, but Kyle was unaffected thanks to the dragon hide armor that negated the poison's effect. Kyle produced a magic stone and hurled it at the hydra, causing it to explode and freeze the hydra. The hydra released its poisonous breath at Kyle, but Kyle dodged it again. With the dragon skin shield, he charged and severed one of the hydra's heads. Seldonia told him that he was fighting better than anticipated. Kale remarked that he had come prepared, but the monster's regeneration was fast. Meanwhile, Theron, Lizzie, and Ozra continued to fight the hellhounds. Ozra mentioned she was concerned about Kale and wondered if he could defeat the hydra by himself. Lizzie confessed she shared the concern, but they had to eliminate the dogs first. They witnessed Theron take down one of the dogs. Then, Kale threw a magic stone at the hydra, freezing it. However, the hydra promptly broke free from the ice. Kale realized he had only one magic stone left. The hydra attacked, but Kale dodged it and chopped off another of its heads. But the head regenerated rapidly. Kale realized that its regeneration was faster than the three-headed hydras. Kale decided he had to target the source. Kale drew out the last magic stone he had, activated it, and lunged towards the hydra. They saw Kale plunge his sword deep into the hydra's body. The monster cried out in pain. He then reached inside and used his magic rings to strike the monster, thrusting his hands deep within, but the monster pushed him away. He got back on his feet and saw the hydra monster standing before him, but a green light was emanating from within. Abruptly, it exploded and disintegrated into pieces. Kale was thrilled that he had succeeded in vanquishing it. Then, they heard Seldonia explain that Kale had planted explosive stones within the wound. Kale replied that throwing the stones at the hydra hadn't done any damage. Seldonia complimented him that it was a powerful strike. Kale clarified that the strike relied on speed and strength, but it put him in danger, so he couldn't use it often in a fight. Elsewhere, the friends had eliminated the hellhounds. Ozra told Lizzie she was anxious about Kale and that they should check on him. They were startled when Kale rejoined them. Ozra asked if he had managed to defeat the Hydra by himself. Kale confirmed, adding that he had faced some trouble. Ozra then told him that he stank, and when Lizzie approached, they told him that he smelled like a Hydra and ran away from him. Kale stood there, frustrated. Then, they saw Kale pouring water over himself. He went over to Theron and inquired about the princess's condition. Theron replied that the princess hadn't regained consciousness yet, and it seemed she and her handmaiden had been drugged. Kale entered the carriage and saw Ozra and Lizzie sitting next to the princess. He told them they needed to give her an antidote to wake her up. Ozra agreed. She produced the antidote and administered it to the princess. At that moment, Theron told Kale he had discovered something on the ground. Kale took it from him and explained that the drivers had lured the monsters to attack the princess. He added that the princess's previous death wasn't an accident but an assassination. In the city, the commander was standing with the prince. The commander told the prince they had dispatched a squad. As evening fell, Kale entered the carriage and inquired about the princess's condition. Ozra shook her head, indicating no change. Just then, the princess started to awaken. She asked if she was alive. Ozra told her to take it easy. The princess said she hadn't expected to wake up again. She then inquired, "Are you the ones who rescued me?" Theron stepped forward and declared that he was the one who had saved her, but Lizzie swiftly punched him in the stomach and motioned for Kale to speak. Kale bowed before the princess, introduced himself as Kale, and told her that he and his companions had witnessed the princess and her guards being attacked while traveling, so they had saved her from the monsters. Just then, Arka, the princess's handmaiden, woke up and rushed to her, but the princess told her to calm down because these were the people who had saved them. Arka cautioned her against trusting strangers, but the princess thanked them for saving her. The princess stood up, but Kale advised that the situation outside was grim, but the princess insisted on going out. Outside, the princess went to one of the bound drivers and examined him. The princess turned and asked if they were on the connecting road between Arkan and Sanis. Kale confirmed they were. Then, the princess inquired if all the guards had perished. Kale reported that they had found them dead upon arriving. Lizzie observed that the princess seemed different than before. Ozri agreed. At that moment, Seldonia told Kale that a squad of knights was approaching from Arkan. Kale informed the princess. The princess panicked and said they had to flee immediately. She continued, saying they wouldn't just kill her, but they would eliminate them along with her. Kale asked, "Won't your kingdom's guards defend you?" The princess replied negatively and added that the man who desired her death was the commander of the 2nd Battalion, Sentis. Kale was startled and recalled seeing him with the princess in the city. Kale asked, "You mean that Sentis?" The princess went to Arka and instructed her to burn all the corpses. They saw Arka utter some magic spells, and all the corpses around her burst into flames. The princess stated that Sentis wanted her dead desperately and that by incinerating the bodies, it would be harder to identify her, and they needed to buy as much time as possible. She instructed Arka to take the lead and told Kale and his friends that they had to leave immediately. Theron threw a bag of dirt into the fire and remarked that if they wanted to stall for time, the monsters would help delay them. He got into the carriage, and they all departed. In the meantime, inside the carriage, Kyle inquires whether Milna truly believes Sentos, head of the Royal Knights 2nd Battalion, is attempting to assassinate her. Milna confirms it, adding that Sentos collaborates with Kearns, her half-brother. Theron and Urza express their shock at this family dispute, while Kyle remains incredulous that Sentos would target the princess. Milna insists she overheard it firsthand yesterday. She recounts being dosed with sleeping draught in her beverage. As she drifted off, she distinctly witnessed Sentos and Kearns discussing how she'd remain unconscious until the following evening, by which time she would be devoured by a monster. Milna was aware of her brother's desire for her demise, but dismissed him as an inept fool. However, she never anticipated Xentos's involvement. She mentions that her usual guard preference is the 5th Battalion, composed entirely of women, yet they are frequently summoned to the capital due to their impressive appearance during ceremonies. Consequently, Xentos and his battalion were assigned as her escort for this journey. Kyle still struggles to accept Xentos as an adversary, suggesting that he has likely devised a new strategy given the failure of the prior one. Milna concurs. Kyle then observes that if Xentos succeeds in killing her, he will attribute the murder to their party, portraying them as the villains. He also deduces that Milna disclosed the details to them to make them a threat to Xentos, preventing them from abandoning her. Milna acknowledges his intelligence in recognizing her intent, urging them to strive for mutual survival. She pledges to reward them upon their safe arrival in the capital, to which Kyle responds that they seek not money or rank, but rather honor and renown. Milna shifts the conversation to tactics, stating that they hold an advantage by adopting a waiting approach. The 5th Battalion is expected to recharge in city the next day, and will promptly search for her upon discovering her absence. They are equally powerful as the 2nd Battalion under Zentos' command, and any disturbance would be more detrimental to Zentos. Theron proposes hiding in a nearby village until reinforcements arrive, but Kyle dismisses it as foolish. Zentos would likely raise the village to eliminate them, endangering more innocent lives with no assurance of success. He proposes returning to Archon, a city teeming with inhabitants, making it impossible for their enemies to kill them all. Furthermore, this would expedite their rendezvous with the 5th Battalion, allowing them to collectively defeat Zentos. Milna objects that they would encounter pursuers if they retrace their steps. Kyle assures her that they will confront them when the time comes. First, they will replenish their supplies, during which Kyle dispatches Syl on a scouting mission. She reports Zentos' absence from the Knights, which Kyle sees as advantageous. Milna is amazed by the capabilities of his intelligence sword, followed by the sheer number of magic stones his party possesses. Then, Lise presents her with a box of high-quality healing potions, instructing her to consume one if injured. Further astonishing Milna, she demands to know their true identities, and Kyle simply states that they are aspiring heroes. Meanwhile, Kearns is furious over Zentos' failed assassination attempt on Milna. Zentos calmly reassures him that he dispatched his men to finish what the monsters started. Kearns insists that Zentos personally killed the princess, but Zentos reminds him that the 5th Battalion will arrive at the city and will interrogate him on Milna's disappearance, which he would not be able to deal with. Kearns relents, and Zentos guarantees success this time. Back in the forest, the Knights spot Milna's carriage approaching. The vice captain orders his men to disable the horses by shooting at them. They prepare to fire when suddenly, several magic stones plummet from the sky directly in front of them. The Knights are caught off guard as explosions erupt. Syl continues to drop magic stones from above. The vice captain yells for the soldiers to return to the formation, but Kyle drives the carriage directly towards him. He dives to the side to evade it, shouting for his soldiers to fire. Urza and Theron assist Kyle in clearing the path from the carriage. They successfully break through the Knights' lines. Once they are a safe distance away, they gulp down healing potions, grateful for their wealth. Abruptly, the carriage halts with a jolt. They exit to discover that their reckless drive through the enemy lines damaged a wheel. With no means of repair, they decide to proceed on foot, and Lise leads the princess in her attendance. Meanwhile, Kyle informs Urza that someone must stay behind to impede the Knights' pursuit, or they will be cornered at the city gates. Urza acknowledges the danger, but Kyle argues that only 30 Knights remain after their prior attacks, which they can manage. She is angered by him risking his life, but Kyle states that he isn't going to do it this time. He tells Theron to stall the Royal Knights, and Theron accepts before even fully grasping the situation. Kyle instructs Urza to cast a wind spell on them to accelerate their escape. Theron only realizes that he is being left behind once they begin running. He shouts for them to stop, and Kyle yells for him to do his best. He panics as he is abandoned. The Knights arrive soon thereafter. Instead of engaging them, Theron waves a white flag and surrenders. He begs for his life, claiming innocence and blaming everything on Kyle. He offers them his money and even divulges the location of the dungeon where he found it. The vice captain remains uninterested. His soldiers quickly discover the empty carriage, and he decides to continue pursuing the princess. As for Theron, he orders his soldiers to eliminate him. Upon hearing this, Theron clings to him, offering anything, even a Gluck 2000 to all the Knights that they spare his life. The vice captain, enraged, decides to kill him himself. On the other hand, Urza is anxious about Theron, fearing the Knights will kill him. Kyle remarks that he would have preferred no one to die, a sentiment that Urza finds insincere. However, Lise suddenly realizes that they neglected to tell her that Theron is actually the strongest among them. Back with the Knights, one man has indeed died, but certainly not Theron. Instead, he has killed the vice captain before he could strike him. He then begins aura farming in the midst of the Knights, believing that eliminating the strongest opponent is the best way to commence the battle. The Knights are in utter shock as Kyle removes his gloves and the training rings and bracelets that have been increasing his weight by 10 times. He feels much lighter now that the restraints are removed, and as the Knights attack him, he easily chops them down. He suddenly throws a magic stone towards the horses, causing an explosion that startles them. The horses flee, leaving the Knights stranded, and Theron is pleased with that. He kills a few more Knights before realizing that he has done enough. He suddenly drops his sword, stating that his mission was to slow them down, not to kill them all. Since their leader is dead and their horses are gone, they cannot catch the princess, so there is no point for them to keep fighting and risk their lives. He asks the Knights to leave now because he doesn't want to kill anyone else, and they decide to take his offer because they know they can't win. However, he was just toying with them, and just as the knights have their back turned towards him, he throws some explosion magic stones to take them out. The ones that are still alive get killed by his swift and merciless strikes. Theron then sits down in the middle of the bloody battlefield, exhausted by acting like a fool and killing 30 knights on his own. In the city, Sentos loses contact with the knights. Realizing their failure, he decides to handle the situation himself, leaving a few knights to guard Kearns while he ventures into the forest alone. Syl detects him approaching and alerts Kyle, but Sentos spots her spying. He strikes her with an energy ball, knocking her out. Syl remarks that he seems quite powerful and skilled. All this is enough to tell Kyle that Sentos is coming towards them, and he halts his group. He instructs Lise and Urza to guard the princess, and if the situation deteriorates, they should immediately turn around and rendezvous with Theron. Milna asks Kyle if he is certain he can fight one of the kingdom's strongest knights alone, and he responds that he didn't want to fight him, but now it seems there is no alternative. Milna suddenly stares intently at him, questioning why he speaks as if he knows Sentos personally. She inquires if their meeting when she was in danger was truly coincidental, but decides that it is not the appropriate time for such questions. She thanks Kyle for fighting on her behalf, and he promises to return victorious. Dawn soon arrives, and Sentos reaches the location where Kyle awaits him. He dismounts his horse and approaches him, inquiring if he is aiding the princess. Kyle confirms it and asks why he is alone when he has more knights with him. Sentos replies that he doesn't want more of his men to die for something that doesn't concern them, when he is enough to finish the job. In a desperate attempt to avoid killing him, Kyle pleads with Sentos to surrender, promising to even ask the princess to pardon him. Sentos finds that suggestion ridiculous. Kyle then asks him why he attempted to assassinate the princess, as money and rank couldn't have persuaded him to betray her. Sentos refuses to answer and assumes his battle stance, confident in a swift victory before pursuing the princess. Kyle mirrors his stance, and they both cast spells to augment their speed and strength. They charge towards each other, and Kyle evades Sentos' initial attack. However, it was merely a diversion, with the real Sentos concealed behind it. Kyle anticipated this maneuver. He manages to dodge the subsequent attack and land a blow, chipping away at Sentos' magic shield. Sentos is surprised because no one has ever dodged his initial attack in their first encounter, but he doesn't know that Kyle is already familiar with his fighting style, because he learned it from him in his past life.